Deputy Executive Director Ibrahim Thiaw, CMS Executive Secretary Dr. Chamber, Ambassador Yan, Artos Bertrand, yeah, and Ms. Nadia Patugalong, the Secretary Atobo, and Director Montita Lim, members of foreign and local media, good afternoon to you all. Thank you for joining in this conference. Your participation is an expression of your interest to be part of the 12th Conference of the Parties to the Convention of the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals, or CMS COP12. As host of this triennial COP meeting, and this being touted as the most attended ever for the CMS, the Philippines will consider this event a great opportunity to show to the ASEAN community and the rest of the world the importance of the country and the region in protecting migratory species and safeguarding their habitats throughout their journey and reigns. We are also here to listen and interact as party states bring forth their respective agendas that will surely seek to intensify conservation efforts of these wild animals. We know that while some terrestrial animals like elephants do not exist in our country, their byproducts and derivatives find their way here, which makes it imperative for us to join the fight against wildlife trafficking and illegal trade. We encourage media to help us disseminate better the fact that species migration is not only an amazing phenomenon that can be read in books or watched on TV, but is something that actually has a direct impact on humanity through the services they provide. Their future, therefore, is indeed our own future. Again, our gratitude to members of the media who are present today, and we hope that this press conference will be fruitful and interactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Roy A. Simatu. Now we would like to hear from the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Migratory Species to tell us more about the issues that shall be discussed in the duration of the convention. Mr. Bradney Chambers.
Thank you very much, and Minister, thank you as well for your kind words. I'd like to read a brief statement, go over some of the different resolutions and some of the outcomes that we're hoping to have from this conference of parties. This is the 12th conference of parties to the Convention on Migratory Species, and it's the foremost international wildlife summit for 2017 on the calendar year this year. We aim to put nature conservation and the conservation of migration species center stage at this conference. The environment belongs in the mainstream, not in the periphery, and wildlife has an enormous contribution to make to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed at the famous UN summit in Rio. Crucial to the task of drawing attention to the plight of migratory species is the role of media. We rely on you to spread the message, why migratory species are significant, and why they yet remain vulnerable. CMS is crucial for addressing these threats to their survival, and it's a very important convention in that regard. There are several intergovernmental treaties dealing with biodiversity, but only the CMS has the remit to protect migratory animals, their habitats, their fly and swimways, and their migration corridors across their entire range. By their very nature, migratory species, whether they be avian, terrestrial, and aquatic, need international efforts to ensure their survival. They face threats that can best be addressed through international cooperation, threats such as climate change, plastic pollution in our seas, and wildlife crime, to name just a few. But because they're oblivious to national borders, migratory species also form a link joining different countries as part of a shared and natural heritage, one that we should cherish. The parties are meeting for the first time in Asia, and I would like to express my deep gratitude for our Filipino hosts for having us here. Parties, or what we call the countries, treaty, are here in record number. We have over 100 countries. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, there's over 24 observer countries that are here that are not members of the CMS yet, but we're hoping that they will be parties soon. I'm glad that the convention is growing. It shows that more and more countries see the CMS as part of the solution to tackle a wildlife crisis. Crisis, the root cause of which are unsustainable human activities. We are determined to turn things around. And last night we had the opportunity to celebrate the commitment of migratory species champions. We had awards being given out to governments of Monaco and Germany, the Environmental Agency of Abu Dhabi, the UAE, and the European Commission. They're making resources, very important resources, available for long-term funding for the convention activities to serve these species. You will see on our agenda an ambitious one that's not available, but we're certain to get through it. We're seeking to make the convention leaner, fitter, by introducing a review mechanism to help parties with implementation. We're consolidating our backlog, actually 35 years of discussions, trying to consolidate these into to updated resolutions, and also streamlining our operations for science. We will be considering proposals to add 35 species conventions agencies. And this is alarming that so many different species that have been proposed. They range from lion, leopard, giraffe, chimpanzees, and a host of array of different species. On land, we'll also be looking at initiatives that will see the CMS societies work together. The African Carnivores Initiative, proposals for the management and conservation of cheetah. This initiative, cheetah, the African wild dog, the African lion, the African wild donkey, and an action plan for the African elephant. At sea, there will be discussions on important marine mammal areas. We'll be looking at guidelines on noise, underwater noise, and also on aquatic wild meat. Also very practical resolutions in terms of swim width regulations and dive width regulations. The focus for avian or bird species will be on the illegal killing, taking, and trade, and the conservation of African Eurasian land birds. Also included in this agenda area, the prevention of poisoning and multi-species action plans covering the African Eurasian vultures, where we're seeing a collapse of the species there on that continent. These species are very important. The vultures are very important for ecosystems and provide a tremendous service in terms of cleaning carcasses and preventing the spread of disease, such as rabies. With sustainable development featuring high at this COP, with our slogan, parties will also be addressing renewable energy. Clearly, wind, tidal, and solar will be part of the mix as we strive for a carbon-free future in response to climate change. But we also have to be aware of the risks, ensure that renewable energy is deployed in places and in ways that minimize the impacts on wildlife in general and migratory species in particular. We recognize that people and wildlife do, in fact, depend on each other. Animals contribute to sustainable development, and at the center of this is ecotourism. They provide services such as pollinators for agriculture and many, many other services. But development without regard for the environment is not sustainable. And you've heard it before, ladies and gentlemen, and you'll hear it again over the course of this week, but their future is our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chambers. Now we shall hear from the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw.
you very much. First of all, let me say how remarkable it is to bring the world to Manila for the first time, hosting the Conference of the Parties of to the CMS. Today, Manila is not only the capital city of the Philippines, but actually it is the world's capital on biodiversity and species in particular. So really, thank you for hosting us here. It's great to be here. It is great to basically put lamplights on Manila, on the Philippines as the host of this very important convention. And I'm sure people will remember for a long period of time the deliberations under the beautiful conditions that we are in today. The Convention on Migratory Species is fundamental to achieving our ambitions, our common ambitions of the Sustainable Development Goals. In a way, the species that we protect under the CMS, they are the bridge between the social, the economic, and the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Why a bridge? These species are very important for our economy. They are very important for our prosperity, for our wealth. They contribute to economic growth in many nations. We talked a lot about sustainable tourism, about ecotourism, but also about other activities that can generate revenues. For example, one gorilla in Eastern Africa can generate up to $1 million per year of revenue. Now imagine if you have few hundreds of them, how much you are contributing to the economy. It is also known that when you bring tourists to your country, you generate revenues in terms of employment. Each hotel room employs 3, 4, up to 7 people. So as you bring people to your country to visit your species, to visit your ecosystems, and to visit your biodiversity, you are generating a lot of revenue to your country. So these species, they are our prosperity. They are the foundation of our economy, but they contribute also to our health. As Bradley said, some species are actually one of the best health insurance that we have. They reduce costs for treatment because they prevent some diseases. So it is very important to understand that when you have species in the wild, you should not take it for granted that they are not contributing to your economy or to your health. They are part of our ecosystems. Without species, there are no ecosystems. And without ecosystems, there is no life. There is no water, there is no clean air. So it is very important that we understand that these species are part of a chain that we are also part of as human beings. So if you destroy the ecosystems, you destroy our life, simply put. So these species are very, very important for our well-being. They are very important not only culturally, spiritually, from the recreation point of view, but they are fundamentally important for our well-being as humanity on this planet. So thank you to the Philippines for hosting us. Thank you to you for really relaying this message that actually these species are part of the foundation for our life, and they are extremely important for the future of our children. I want to live this life with an environment that is healthy for my children and my grandchildren to actually enjoy. I don't want to be the last species on this planet because we are part of this species. I don't want to be witnessing the total disappearance of some species, including the ones that Ian Atri Bertrand talked about this morning. Yes, it is important that we all contribute to the conservation of these species. The elephant of Africa is important to the Philippines as much as the rhino is very important for another country because we are all in one planet and in one earth. They don't recognize political borders. So when we say migratory species, they are migrated to us vis-a-vis our borders, but they don't have borders. They live in their ecosystem. So they are not migratory for them. They are part, they live in their environment. It is like you living here in this part of Manila, you think that someone else in another part of Manila is migrating. They are not, because they are part of the same Manila city. So these species have their ecosystems that have their own boundaries. Yes, it is important to protect them. We as human beings, we make definitions and we decided that these are migratory species, but in their brains, they are not migratory. They live in their ecosystems and their ecosystems are as large as they can migrate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thiao. Now we shall hear the opening statement of the Secretary General of CITES, Mr. John Scanlon. Sir?
Great, thank you very much. And it's wonderful to be here in the very vibrant city of Manila and to see so many media here. Wonderful to see so many. And a big thank you, State Secretary, to the government and the people of the Philippines for your famously warm hospitality. You've created a beautiful mood for this meeting. Look at this logo. How good does that look? All of these images, how can you not be inspired by these migratory species? So, CITES, we regulate international trade in wildlife, both facilitating legal trade and combating illegal trade. The CMS, the Convention on Migratory Species, looks at ensuring that these species of animals can go over international borders and be protected. So we have something in common. We both deal with animals that cross borders. In the case of the CMS, they walk on their feet, they fly with their wings, they go in the water with their flippers. In the case of CITES, we regulate trade. They find themselves on a plane or a bus or a truck or a ship. But there is the cross-boundary movement. And this is why we definitely need international cooperation. You cannot protect a migratory species or a species in trade or potentially in trade without international cooperation by definition, because you're going across international borders. So we work very closely with the Convention on Migratory Species, looking at elephants, sharks, rays, snow leopards, gorillas, all sorts of species. And our objective is to be sure that these migratory species and species in trade or potentially in trade can survive for our generation and, as Ibrahim said, for generations to come. But as this meeting is highlighted, it's not just for the benefit of the animals themselves. There are massive benefits for people. And this conference and the events we had yesterday is all about people and how people benefit from wildlife. And Nadia today talked about the African elephant and the threats that it's under through poaching and smuggling. We are fighting for the African elephant as well as many other species. We are working with countries from source to transit to destination states, non-government sector, government sector, and we will be releasing information this week that shows we are turning the poaching of the African elephant around. We are starting to win. We will win, and the African elephant and all the other wonderful animals on this planet will survive for our children and children to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scanlon. I vividly remember 4 years back when we destroyed 5 tons of elephant tusks here in Manila, and we're very happy about that achievement. At this point, we will hear from the United Nations Environment Program Goodwill Ambassador, Ms. Nadia Hutagalong.
Thank you very much. John, I would like to challenge you. And also there was someone who, after I mentioned that I was so moved about the state of our wildlife and that my child had pointed out that she, maybe when she grows up, will not see elephants in the wild. And so John is very adamant about the fact that they're having some success. But if you look at where we've come from, I don't really think that we can call where we are now success, to be very honest. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. So turning it around is a great thing. So let's reconvene on that in a few years. And I'll be very happy to see that you are right. Okay. And what I have written out here actually echoes what Ibrahim had mentioned earlier. And for too long, we have drawn lines in the sand, trying to distinguish between you and I, or us and them. And now more than ever, we need to change this me-focused attitude into a we-focused attitude. Okay, so these animals that we're trying to protect and that we're talking about, they know no boundaries. And if we can recognize that we too live as one humanity on one planet with finite resources, then maybe we might have a slight chance in benefiting these migratory species. One of the blessings of time is that we've been able to assess and see now, and we can actually show what many have known for so long, is that we're so intricately, so intricately interconnected, which is why the theme of their future is our future is so incredibly relevant at this time. Now, the reason I do what I do is because of what I saw in the ocean over 20 years ago. And uh, I first got my diving license 24 years ago, and then a year after that I had a child, and then I went diving again in the same place, and then within a year, the same place where I went diving, there was so much degradation. The first year I was there was fish, there was coral, it was vibrant, it was colorful, and in just a year, when I went back to the same location, it was gray. The fish that I saw were in fish traps, and there was rubbish in the sea. And that already at that time for me immediately rang alarm bells, and it was not just about the fish in the sea, but the life of my child and what will be left for my child if in 1 year so much damage had been done. So as a parent, or even just as a member of humanity living on this planet, I feel that it is my responsibility and perhaps all of our responsibility to do whatever we can to ensure through our actions, through our purchases, through the way we consume and the companies that we support, that we can ensure or try to slow down at least the degradation that's happening in this planet and that causes so much disharmony for the migrating species. So I fast forward to last November in Bali when we launched the UN Clean Seas campaign. It was wonderful to do that in Bali. I've been living there for 4 years, and we really do see the incredible damage that is being done and the enormous amounts of waste that we see in the ocean, on the beaches, in the rivers, and because it's such a tourist hotspot, it really does suffer quite a lot. Each year, 8 million tons of plastic end up in the oceans as a result of our consumption. Marine species and ecosystems are seriously affected, coastal economies are damaged, and the impact on human health could be dramatic. By 2050, there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And again, a note on interconnectedness here. We talk about the plastics in the ocean and we talk about more plastics than fish, but we also have to look at the fact that the fish ingest the plastic and then we consume the fish. And we all know that plastics are toxic. So it's very simple. You just have to draw this little diagram up and see how everything is so interconnected, and how when you buy plastic water bottles, plastic bottles and plastic cups and throw them away, single-use plastics, they end up in the ocean. Straws, all of these things. So in the Coral Triangle, and being in a region where so many people live off the fishing industries and live off the ocean, you have to really think about the way that we consume. And now to rejoice in the 30 countries who have actually come on board to join the Clean Seas campaign, including my home country of Indonesia and also our host country of the Philippines. So far, for those of the 24 who are not yet participating, is that correct? 24? Is it for Clean Seas or for CMS? The observer countries, is that correct, Rodney? CMS, okay. But for the countries who haven't joined the Clean Seas campaign, you have an opportunity to do that and make your commitments at the UN Environment Assembly, which is coming up, and the focus will be on pollution. So once again, for the media, as it has been highlighted before, you guys have such an important role, because it is through storytelling that you change people's minds and hearts. And it's only through storytelling that I have been driven to do what I do and continue to do what I do, because I am an optimist and a realist. And so you have such a huge responsibility to be able to tell those stories, to empower and engage and inspire people to want to make a difference in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hutagalong. And speaking of storytelling, our next speaker is a storyteller himself. The UN Environment Global Goodwill Ambassador, Mr. Jan Arthus Bertrand.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Talking about the plastic, Philippines are not on the good rate for that. You know that we are the most polluted country for plastic. You know that. I was just reading. China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand and Vietnam are spraying out much of 60% of the plastic waste. So it's a long story to do. You have a big work to do, my friend. And I'm sorry to say that, but you have to say the truth. I'm very involved in animals in all my life from when I was 20. The last night when I was reading on my computer trying to work on the speech we are doing this morning, I was amazing by the last numbers. You know, when the last WWF report, we are going to lose 67% of species and between the 70s and the last in the 20 in 90s. It's amazing as in this century, at the end of this century, we will lost 67 species of wild species. These numbers are amazing. Amazing how we fail completely on our work, what we do for many years. And we must know that we have to accept, we have to change our way to work and perhaps to speak to the citizen. I don't know. I don't have the solution. Anyway, because you are so many journalists are here, I want to send you a message. Perhaps you can please report. I speak about the elephant. Elephant is elephant are in danger. They were 20. It's nice to speak about numbers because numbers explain you exactly what is the fact today. It's not elephant disappearing, it's the fact. There were 20 million elephants in the beginning of the last century. Okay. Now, there are 350,000. And we lost every year 10%. The scientists speak about the inevitable disparition of the elephant. I cannot accept that. You know, we speak for the last 20 minutes. On the last 20 minutes, one elephant was killed in Africa. So I want to send the message to China, to Vietnam, to Hong Kong. We are the first buying ivory. They have the future of the elephant in the end. They can decide if the elephant have to live or not. I think it's important to say that to the press, to put the pressure on the China government. They have the future of the elephant on the end. And like he says, Ibrahim said, I don't want to be the last species on the planet. And I'm not pessimistic. It's too late to be pessimistic. It's really too late to be pessimistic. What we need is action. And action is to do something. And you press, you have a big power. You can change a thing. You can do things. You know, you have a voice. I'm a journalist also, so I know exactly what we can do with the TV and newspaper, internet, and everything. So please help the elephant with your work. I see acting will make you happy. You know, like Martin Luther King, he says, even I'm going to die tomorrow, I will plant an apple trees tomorrow. And I love this. Even I'm going to die tomorrow, I'm going to plant a trees, apple trees. I think we have always, even it's the end of something, we still have to try to change the world. Then we will succeed, I'm sure. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Maraming salamat. Before we open the floor for questions from our friends from the media, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of the Biodiversity Management Bureau Director, Dr. Mundita Lim.
I'm sorry to forget, this book will arrive today from the custom. It was blocked in the custom for 10 days. It's supposed to arrive. Thank you. Thank you. So this book we can have for all the press, so we can have one is about what the CMS is doing. Fantastic jobs about what they do. Voilà, merci.
Thank you very much. And of course, we are all looking forward to seeing the film tomorrow.
Yes, to,
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have our mic at the center. Please state your name, your affiliation, and your question, and to whom you are addressing your question to. The floor is now open for questions. Yes, sir.
Land-based Are there any land-based migratory species left in Asia? Because I have the impression that we've eaten all of them.
Sir, please state your name and your affiliation for the benefit of everyone.
Cecil
Thank you.
Morelli of the French News
Thank you.
Agency, AFP.
Without question, there's lots of species left. Many of them are protected under the Convention on Migratory Species. Just to name a few of them, the Saiga antelope, which actually is a very good success story of this population of antelope that was basically decimated after the change in the collapse of the Soviet Union. There was a lot of illegal hunting and poaching of the Saiga antelope, and the populations just went off the map. The species has been listed under the CMS. It's also listed under CITES, and the populations have actually come back, and we're seeing stabilization of the populations of the Saiga antelope. But there's lots of other species. For example, another species that we've been working on very hard is the snow leopard. A very iconic species, beautiful species, which another species that's jointly managed between CITES and CMS, and also their prey, the Argali sheep. But it's actually a very rich, it's not like Africa, they're spread out a little bit different and across the plains and the steppes of Asia, but certainly it's a very diverse ecosystem still.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Christine Gonzalez from Today Online. My question is, were there been some laws that have been amended as to the protection of this species and the likes, partnering with the law enforcement? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll let John say a few words about that because the CITES context is a little bit different. But I want to say within the CMS that we still need to strengthen the legal systems at the national level. And this is one of the reasons that we have before this conference of parties the proposal to have a review or a compliance mechanism that will try to hold countries more accountable for the species that have been listed under the convention, and also to help countries to comply with the provisions under the CMS, to try to facilitate their work and to try to promote laws at the national level. CITES is a much more regulatory convention. I'll pass the mic over to John.
Thank you very much. Yes, having sound legislation to implement at a national level, both CMS and CITES, is key, because without national legislation, it doesn't go anywhere. Under CITES, we have a national legislation project where we work with countries to be sure they have the necessary legislation. We have the support of UNEP with that, CMS and other colleagues. But what we're doing through the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime, that is CITES, Interpol, United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, World Customs Organization and World Bank, is to ask all countries to treat wildlife crime as a serious crime. And serious crime is defined under the UN Convention on Transnational Organized Crime as 4 years imprisonment or more. And what we're saying is where wildlife crime is transnational, is organized as it is with respect to illegal trade in elephant ivory, you must treat it as a serious crime, 4 years or more imprisonment, and apply the same tools and techniques you use to combat other serious crimes, be it illicit trafficking in narcotics, human trafficking. So good use of forensics, good investigations, what's called controlled deliveries, don't seize at the border, track it to home. So this legislation is a foundation. That's why the CMS has a very important proposal here about a national legislation project, highlighting the importance of that if you're going to effectively implement at a national level.
Thank you so much. Do you have more questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Shaila Francisco from Bloomberg TV Philippines. One of the most controversial issues is the exploitation of migratory species in ecotourism sites. So, what kind of proposal or regulations can we expect to be proposed or to be put out here in the whole summit? And for Secretary Roy Simatu, what has the Philippine government been doing to protect the whale sharks in the Philippines?
Well, under the convention, migratory species, we have two categories. The first category is Appendix 2, and this is calling for the sustainable management of the species. So if the species is moving between a number of different states, then what we have in the CMS is a framework for them to cooperate to try to manage the species. This is including protected areas, where sometimes in Africa we have shared protected areas which demand further cooperation, but also some of the species rely on the connectivity between the protected areas when they migrate. They may stop over in different countries with different protected areas. So this is very important. Now, where the strict protection comes into effect is on Appendix 1, and any species that's listed under the CMS as Appendix 1 requires no taking. There's no taking at all. There's strict protection, and this is including in protected areas. And we've seen across the globe some incidents where this takes place. And when it does take place, we alert the government of their obligation to protect the species and ask them what they're doing to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Protected areas are, as I said, are very important. A good example of having to try to ensure that we have these protected areas that aren't threatened by poaching or illegal killing was the situation we have in between Africa and Europe right now, and where the birds are migrating very long distances between the two continents. And just before they make the long journey over the Mediterranean, in fact, they need to sort of store up energy and food. And many of the protected areas, given the instability on the border, in fact, were being used as illegal killing or sites where there's illegal killing and illegal netting. And we've worked very hard through a task force on illegal killing, bringing the governments to the table to discuss these issues and try for them to step up their measures of enforcement to avert this kind of a situation in the future.
Thank you so much, Secretary Simatu.
Yeah, good afternoon. To add, we're talking about the whale shark. We are working with the local government unit of Donsol in barangay in Sorsogon. This barangay or this barrio is rich in coastal and marine resources and nutrient-rich plankton. This makes it one of the favorite spots of butanding. We call it butanding here in the Philippines for hundreds of years now. Based on record, it has the highest aggregation of butanding between the months of December and June every year. As what we are doing, we have a proposed resolution for the uplisting of the whale shark. We call it Rhincodon typus from CMS Appendix 2 to Appendix 1. We have sightings not only in the Sorsogon but also in Bicol, Palawan, Cebu, Negros, and Pangasinan. The global migration route of this whale shark is from Gabon, Madagascar, Mozambique, Pakistan, Peru, Portugal, and Tanzania. Whale sharks are migratory across national boundaries and move from national exclusive economic zones into the high seas. The threats, the fishery catches or bycatch in nets and vessel strikes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Simatu. Before we move to our next question, we'd like to thank Mr. Ibrahim Thiao, the UNEP Deputy Executive Director, for joining us. He has to go on to a very important engagement at this point. Thank you so much, Mr. Thiao. Let's now have the next question, please.
So,
Name and affiliation and then your
yes,
question,
good
please.
afternoon. I'm Apples from ABS-CBN News. So just a follow-up to the previous question, how will CMS institutionalize the sustainability of our ecotourism industries? Because as Mr. Thiao reiterated, it can actually give livelihood to people in the communities. So how will we ensure that it's sustainable? Yeah. So how will CMS as a convention institutionalize that? Because we're hoping that that will be included in the Manila Declaration. That will be the outcome of this convention.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, ecotourism is really important to the CMS and its species because it shows the other side of the value of these species, not just their iconic and a value that we have, their intrinsic value, but also their economic value. And we've talked within the COP of many different examples. The fact that you have shark dive tourism that's multi-billion-dollar industry, or whale watching, or in fact in the United States, bird watching as a pastime is bigger than baseball. So ecotourism is huge for these species, and as Ibrahim Tao mentioned in his opening speech, that these are assets to countries that need to be guarded. So as I said in one of my speeches earlier, that having Africa without the elephants is like Paris without the Eiffel Tower. So we really need to think about that. Now, the CMS is very practical in that way. The Philippines has a resolution before it, before the COP on ecotourism, and they need to strengthen that and integrate that more into the work of the CMS. And maybe the minister or the state secretary would like to say a few words about that. But from the CMS's side, we're very practical about that. You asked about the sustainability, and we have been working to think about how we can make it sustainable, and that we don't further degrade what's already been happening in terms of the species. At the last COP, for example, we passed resolutions on boat-based wildlife watching. This is setting international guidelines and standards to ensure that when there is operations for ecotourism, like whale watching, that there's certain standards. You don't get too close to the whales. You respect the species. You don't cause a lot of disturbances. At this COP, for example, we have another resolution that's before the parties, that is looking at ensuring that when we have swim with programs, when sometimes you have tourists, they like to swim with dolphins, sometimes with whales as well. And there needs to be standards on how that happens, how the interaction might take place. So I guess what I'm saying is the CMS comes at this from we recognize the importance of ecotourism, but at the same time, we recognize that we need to set guidelines on how we move forward to ensure what you just said, the sustainability of the species. Do you want to say a few words about your resolution on ecotourism?
Yes, in the Philippines, we have the Executive Order 111, or establishing the guidelines for developing ecotourism in the Philippines. The National Ecotourism Agenda recognizes the social and economic values of water birds by promoting bird watching. The Department of Tourism has launched some bird watching sites that include 7 migratory water bird sites. It is a form of tourism being promoted in the context of nature conservation, and one which can contribute to economic welfare of communities.
Thank you so much, Secretary Simado. We'll take 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am, please get the mic. So there, Mr. Chambers mentioned earlier, don't get too close to the sharks, ergo, no touching, no riding, most especially.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Mads Miraflor of Manila Bulletin. I'm just wondering if we have any data in terms of how much a nation or a government stands to lose in wildlife trafficking? And for Secretary Simatu, what are we doing to penalize wildlife traffickers? Thank you.
Well, in the Philippines, in protecting migratory species, we have some relevant provisions of migratory species covered under Wildlife Act or Republic Act 9147, fishing what was acted in 2001. Number one, no hunting policy except for subsistence and traditional use by indigenous peoples. Wildlife trade regulations, implementations of the CITES listed in the migratory species. If you're in the airport, you can see this DNR personnel in the gates in the airports, where they're very strict in the importing, exporting of this migratory or this wildlife. We have also the national list of threatened species included in our department order, which include 24 species. We have updated this and as of May 2017. Of the 160 migratory species occurring in the other countries, 24 species are included in the national list, threatened species here in the Philippines. And also, we have established critical habitats, like for example in La Pachia. These are it is really a no hunting zone, and it is really a national established critical habitats in our country.
Sir,
Mr.
Secretary,
Scan.
just a follow-up. Do you have a data on how much is the value of wildlife trade in the Philippines?
Well, we will. I will consult the department bureau here on the data about uh,
Wildlife trade.
Actually, we're still it's underestimated as of now because it is based on the taxes that we lose. So around at the moment it's around 12 million pesos. But as I mentioned, the value of the species itself in terms of ecosystem services has not yet been integrated into the accounting.
Thank you so much. Mr. Scanlon would like to say a few words about that as well.
Thank you. The UN Office of Drugs and Crime, together with our consortium, released the first ever UN World Wildlife Crime Report last year. And what it identified is there are around 7,000 species that are found in illegal trade. Some of them are species that can be traded with the right permits, but criminal gangs are not getting the permits. Others are species that cannot be traded commercially under CITES, elephant ivory, rhino horn, etc., where you've got a very large element of transnational organized crime driving it. What they also found is there are nationals from 140 countries that are implicated in the illegal wildlife trade. This affects every region, not just this region, but every region is affected one way or another. And the estimate of the value of illegal trade, excluding marine and timber species, is around $20 billion per year. Now, there is a separate report being done by UN Office of Drugs and Crime focusing purely on the Asian region. I haven't got it with me today, but that's available online if you want to get the specific statistics on Asia. But this is a serious crime. It has serious implications for wildlife and for people. And that's why we're working so hard to say it must be treated as a serious crime in the same way we treat other serious crimes like illicit trafficking in narcotics, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. $20 billion is a huge amount. It is indeed a serious crime. We'll take the last question. Yes, name and affiliation, please.
My name is Ina Teves from the Philippines News Agency. To what extent is wildlife already integrated in socio-economic policies of countries, and how can we increase this integration further? Thank you. How do we increase this integration further?
Integration.
Well, we're seeing sharp declines across the board in species. Many of the species that are protected under the CMS, we haven't really seen the populations come back, and we continue to struggle to work with countries to ensure their survival. In fact, what we need to do, I'm going to, of course, coming from a multilateral environmental agreement, I'm going to tell you that one of the most important things is having international cooperation through legal frameworks. This is critical for species that migrate between international boundaries. So this is something that we need to strengthen the cooperation. We need to strengthen the legal cooperation. We also need to strengthen the legal frameworks at the national level. We need to do more awareness raising of the plight of these species. That's really quite important. In terms of the awareness raising, we also need to make these connections that we're talking about at this conference of parties, of the fact that our species are not just, they have not just iconic and intrinsic values, that they have economic values. And if they do have economic values and we can raise awareness to make people aware that know that, then there's more potential for that species to be protected. And there's many examples of species that we already know how important they are to our economies. But there's a lot of species out there that we still need to increase the understanding of how important they are. And it may not just be in terms of ecotourism. It may be in terms of, it may be a bird species that's very important for pollination. It may be a particular agricultural product that it's important to a national economy. It may be something like a species that control diseases like Zika and malaria. Many of our bird and bat species, they eat thousands and thousands of insects, and the insects are vectors for these rather very serious health concerns and diseases. So I think the more that we can get people to understand that, and governments to ensure that they set in place legislation and laws to protect these species, I think that'll make the change that we need, and maybe shift back towards seeing some of these populations that we've seen over the last, at least over the history of the convention, declining, but instead coming back and increasing and then thriving. That's the objective of the convention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scanlon, and to all our, sorry, Mr. Chambers. Thank you so much to our panelists. And just a few announcements before we let you go. Number one, you are all invited to the side events until the 26th, where you can also have interviews with our very good experts in terms of different ranges of topics. You are also invited to the field trips, which will be held in Bataan, Corregidor, Taal, and Batangas, where you will have spectacular views of different places here in the Philippines. A press release will also be emailed to you after this press conference. And right after this, you have the chance to interview our panelists individually. Just approach us and we'll let you know when it's your turn. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the opening press conference. And we wish everyone a very successful CMS COP12. Thank you so much and good afternoon to everyone. We'd like to request one photo op for all our panelists together. At the center, please. To those who are interested to take a group photo with all our panelists, please, you may approach the front.